I am pleased to present our keynote speaker for today, the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III. He is a third-generation activist. He stands in the tradition of his grandfather, who worked hard for the right to vote that he never really enjoyed. And then he's in the tradition of someone we all are familiar with, the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss Jr., great preacher, was with Dr. King, and continues to just give us powerful words from the pulpit. Was the former pastor of the Olivet Institutional Baptist Church in Cleveland. But Otis Moss III is best known for his creativity in this short film he produced called Otis's Dream, talking about the journey of his father and grandfather. And you're looking at a legacy of great preaching, commitment to the struggle for justice. I invite you to listen to our keynote for today, the Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III, Senior Pastor of the Trinity United Church of Christ.
I first want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the Rainbow Push community and to our leader, to our sage, to the prophet, none other than Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson. I remember in Cleveland when I was small, I believe it was about nine or 10, that Push was having its convention in Cleveland at what was known as the Bond Court Hotel, and having the opportunity to not only hear Reverend Jackson, but the entire Push family doing work, talking about South Africa and about contracts that need to be put together to empower our community. You have been at this work a long time, from SCLC to Operation Breadbasket to Push XL to Rainbow Push, and I was dragged as a child to just about every Push function, and I am thankful that I was. So I thank the Push family, the Rainbow Push family, and the Jackson family for what you mean to this nation, for what you have given, for what you have sacrificed for this country. You have always been committed to expanding this democracy, not shrinking this democracy. You've always been committed to building literally a rainbow coalition where those who have been marginalized would find a space where they can thrive. We are at a critical time in this nation, a critical time where democracy is under assault by men and women who are apologists for an antebellum and Confederate ideology. We have so much at stake if we are to be the yet-to-be United States of America. And this Juneteenth is symbolic of our fight for freedom. This Juneteenth is symbolic for those who did not want to share emancipation, the news of emancipation, and to keep people living in darkness. But yet our community continued to find ways to punch holes in the darkness. I thank you for this privilege to share this message today with the entire Push community. I want to draw your attention to the Gospel according to Mark, the 5th chapter, beginning with verse 24. Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I can just touch what touched him, if I can just touch his clothes, the hem of his garment, I will be healed. Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed. She was emancipated from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then this sister, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter," let me say it again. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has emancipated you. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering and exploitation." May the Lord add a blessing to the reading and hearing of God's holy word. I want to, for the next few moments that we have, this moment in history and time with Rainbow Push, I want us to focus on this idea of we have nothing to lose, you have nothing to lose, I have nothing to lose, we have nothing to lose. Beloved, as a child, I loved the circus. My godfather, by the name of Alfred Warren, who was nicknamed Torpedo because he was an all-American diver at the Central State University, took me and my god brother Carlin Warren yearly to the circus, the Barnum and Bailey three-ring circus. I loved everything about the circus. I loved that little tiny car that all those clowns piled into. I loved the high wire act, the trapeze artist. I loved the lions, the tigers, the bears. Oh my, I loved all aspects of the circus. But the animals that fascinated me more than any other animal were the elephants. These magnificent, enormous beasts were rather peculiar to me, though. These amazing, powerful, extraordinary, and beautiful beasts would listen to a little man who had nothing more than a whip and maybe a chair. Now, they were bigger than this man. They had more power than this man. They had more strength than this man. They literally had more physical and physiological authority than this man. But they listened to someone who didn't have as much power or authority because he held a whip and a little chair. And I have to be honest with you that when my godfather took me to the circus, I was always nervous because we had good seats. And I was afraid because we had in the third or the fourth row at the Richfield Coliseum outside of Cleveland. I was always nervous that if the elephants decided that they were going to have a coup d'etat, a revolution, that there was nothing that we could do sitting in the third or fourth row. And as a child, I always wanted to know. I wanted to know, why was it that an elephant, an animal with such power, with such strength, with such authority, would bow down to a man who was fragile and at the same time abusive? Why would they listen to a person who did not have as much power, did not have as much authority, did not have as much strength, who simply had a whip and a chair? My godfather educated me by saying that in order for the elephants to be in the position that they are and listen to the so-called trainer, is that they had to train the elephants, not educate, but train the elephants from infancy to accept the commands of the trainer. That they would put chains around the necks of the elephants, and they would have a chain that was no more than 12 feet in length. And as the elephant developed and grew, he would grow up used to the chains, expecting the chains, and knowing that there was a limitation upon his possibility. And so when the elephant became a full-grown adult, they would emancipate the elephant from the chains, but the memory or the miseducation that was now prevalent within the mind of the elephant would still function as if the elephant was not emancipated, even though the elephant was emancipated. That once the elephant was now grown, that he or she was emancipated, but the chains still lived in the elephant's mentality, and that there was a shadow on the limitation, a lid on the limitation, on the possibility of what the elephant could do according to what was operating in the elephant's mind. And what I discovered later, learning more about the circus, that the circus needed to train animals to make sure they knew their place in order to make money that never went to the elephants, but in order to enrich those who were the owners of the circus. But I found out something, that the most dangerous animal in a circus is an animal who recognizes, I have nothing to lose. As soon as the animal realizes that you, little man, with your whip and your chair, with your little filibuster, don't have the ability to keep me in my position, then there is a coup d'etat and a revolution that is on the way. That once the animal realizes that you have no authority and power over me, then the world is about to change. See, one must understand this, that there are boxes people create for us just to keep us from seeing the potential and power in us. They seek to keep us living within the limitations that they have designed. And what people say about you says more about their mind than it does about your soul. I like the way that James Baldwin says it. He says, the words you choose to call me and the prison you designed for me reveals more about you than it does about me. You see, we must be some kind of powerful that people will spend so much energy trying to limit, control, constrict, and cancel our ability to fully participate in this democracy known as America. And I'm here to let you know, Rainbow Push, that politicians have fashioned policies, economists have produced theories, theologians have designed doctrines, scientists have created categories, and man manufactured labels. The wall between your calling and your constriction is mighty thin. And the moment that we have the courage to be, in the words of Paul Tillich, to lean into the truth of your sacred nature, is the moment you shall become the central character in the story of your own liberation. In the Old Testament, a bleeding woman, a woman experiencing her menstrual cycle, in the English translation, is called unclean. The English word unclean, according to Dr. Gaffney, is not the most accurate word to translate the Hebrew word when the English translators write the word unclean. But the word restriction is closer to the meaning. Unclean carries a moral implication, as if the natural biological processes God created is unclean. Menstruation causes a time of restriction because blood flow carries the power of life and death. And anyone, male or female, who is bleeding must be restricted from the community, as their blood carries the potential for life and death. Bleeding that refuses to stop, or a lesion upon one's hand, scales on the arm, calls for the person to be restricted, kept in a different location with limited mobility. But we have used the term and the word unclean over and over again, as if God made somebody unclean. There was restriction, but it is not unclean. That usually happens when a patriarchy is usually making all of the doctrine and the rules, they end up leaving out particular individuals that God has already placed God's hand upon. And we must see here that this form of restriction was placed disproportionately on the shoulders of women. Restriction forced women who hemorrhaged to live in exile next to the restricted neighborhoods. You completely missed what I said, that they would place restriction on those who were hemorrhaged, those who were bleeding, but they had to live within a restricted neighborhood, a neighborhood that did not have all of the necessary resources in order to flourish and to thrive, that neighborhood was restricted because there were policies that were in place to ensure that neighborhood could not thrive, and then there was a doctrine in place that would then marginalize those sisters so that they could not thrive, but yet they had a political ideology that said it was their fault that they were not thriving. There were neighborhoods that were restricted, and these people then became invisible to the entire community. That anybody with a visible difference was deemed spiritually and medically restricted. But here is the good news. I'm almost done, y'all. Here's the good news, is that Jesus shows up. And you've got to know that whenever Jesus shows up, something is about to change and be transformed. And that Jesus, in the 5th chapter of Mark, has already arrived. He's already been hanging out with a man who had demon possessed, who had a variety of demons within his spirit. And when he witnessed this person who was living among the tombs, who had some mental health challenges, he freed this man. He freed him from a legion of issues. Hold on now. That's a whole nother message. It's said that in the scripture that the demons answered and said, "We are legion." In other words, his issues ended up answering instead of the man, but it's Jesus who exorcises the demons, and the man is then clothed and in his right mind, and the people are afraid. That's a whole nother message, that when you're clothed and in your right mind, people aren't afraid of you when you have a variety of issues and you are cutting yourself, living in the tombs. In other words, a space that does not have any type of economic development and also has the resources in order for the community to thrive. But when you are freed from the issues that keep you from being the person that God wants you to be, there are people who will be afraid of your power, even though all you're doing is sitting and in your right mind. And this woman heard that Jesus was in town. That's why I love this sister. This sister is something else. She is so powerful, and I want to break some things down so you understand the power of this woman. You see, she was restricted because there were human beings that were looking through fundamentalist eyes and restricting her instead of looking at restoration. But when Jesus is present, captives are set free, storms cease, withered hands are restored, and the paralyzed start walking, and guess what? Mama starts shouting. You see, Jesus is present, but this story rests on a sister, if I may break this down and bring a womanist interpretation so that you can see this word in a way that you have never seen it before. There is an unknown woman within this particular text. We don't know anything about her. We don't know her name. We don't know where she was born. We know that she has been restricted. We know her condition. We know her issues, but we know nothing about her character. You still missed it. You see, we know her condition, but we don't know her. Well, we know her condition, but they don't give you any indication about her character. And I want you to understand, don't confuse condition with character. Condition, I have no control over. It's external, but character is my choice. You will never reach your calling until you learn how to interrogate yourself and deal with your spiritual character. And that's what I like about this woman, that you have to question the boxes other people created for you. That part of the condition that we find ourselves in is a condition that other people created, but we also gave consent to. Because the only way that you can fully be enslaved is you have to accept some of the chains. You have to fight every day, even if people put you in chains, even if people want to restrict the voting, even if people want to say that you can't teach your history in the school system. You got to fight every day and cannot consent to your own enslavement. But part of what happens is sometimes that we end up restricting ourselves, that we place restriction on ourselves because we accept an interpretation of the world through somebody else's eyes. But you see, what you have done to yourself, my father says it this way, one of the greatest sins is the sin of self-disenfranchisement. To live by the boxes that someone else created for you is an insult to God. It has to be your choice. If you want to leave restriction and leave exile. But let me move on here and break this thing down about this sister. I love this sister. This sister is so powerful, and I like to put it down that she's a courageous sister. Why is she a courageous sister? I told you, she is a woman who's been hemorrhaging. She is a woman who has an issue of blood. She is a woman who lives in a restricted area, in a restricted community, that there is a doctrine that says that there's something wrong with her, according to the theologians who are men who do not have any understanding of the suffering and the pain. When she looked for medical help, because there was no system for her to be covered, they had people who were taking advantage of the fact that she didn't have enough money. So she had doctors who were also exploiting her, and she's living in a particular community. But she recognized that I have nothing to lose. You still missed your shout. She's living in a restricted area. She's living in a place that doesn't have any resources. She's living with other people who have the same mentality, who are living in an area that is restricted from resources. There are other people like her. There are other people who've dealt with the same type of exploitation because they have to live in the same area. But she makes the decision. It's only one who comes out of this restriction, this courageous sister. And that's what I love about this sister, because she recognizes she has nothing to lose. Sometimes you've got to have enough courage that even if you don't get what you want, you have to leave your location so that you can have some different scenery. It's not about just the win. It's the fact that you've got to leave out of the restriction that other people have placed for you. And as a community, we've got to continue our fight and leave any restriction that any particular community says that we have to stay in. And I'm here to let you know on this Juneteenth that we've got to fight for a John Lewis bill. We've got to fight to ensure that we are able to vote. We've got to continue to fight. And in each and every state across this nation, we've got to chip away at the walls that have been created that are shrinking our democracy because we have nothing to lose. See, you've got to understand this, that sometimes God will move through not directly in your life, but you come in contact with somebody who's been in contact with God. Now, I know I'm talking to somebody because you had a mother or a grandmother who knew how to pray for you. Before you knew how to pray for yourself, didn't have a relationship with Jesus, but somebody was praying in your life. You came in contact with somebody who is already in contact with God. And so I like the fact that she says, if I can get to the hem of his garment, if I can touch what's already been in contact with him, because his divine DNA literally will be sprinkled on anything that touches him. And if I can just get a fraction, a molecule, if I can just get a molecule what has touched him, that molecule will do something in my life. And so she rolls up on the disciples, the church folk who are blocking her from getting her blessing. And those disciples are trying to keep people from getting around and connecting to Jesus. And what I like here, instead of her trying to push past, she does something that is so powerful. You see, if normally we would think that the woman would reach over the top in order to touch Jesus, but it says she touched the hem. Now, the hem means that it was at the bottom. The hem is what is at the bottom of one's particular garment. So instead of trying to push past, she gets past the restriction that other people, church folk, have right in front of her. What does she do? In order to get to the hem of Jesus, she has to get on her knees and stretch past those who are trying to block her blessing. Somebody missed their shout right there. You will notice she had to put herself in a position of humility and stretch to God and touch what had touched God. And sometimes you've got to put yourself in a position of humility so that you can be ready to receive what God specifically has for you. And at this moment, something radical happens within this text that I love so very much. It is Jesus who says, "Power has gone out from me." Now, the disciples don't understand it because, they're just trying to protect Jesus, and they end up creating a doctrine around him that keep people from connecting with Jesus. You'll get it when you go back home. But you see here, they say, how can you see that someone has touched you? There's too many people pressing around here. But Jesus says, "I know power went out from me." You've got to see this. Jesus didn't release the power. The woman had enough faith and humility simultaneously to take her power, that she was willing to reach to God and say, "I need this. I know you have it. I'm going to take a molecule from you, and a molecule is enough to remake my entire body, so I'm not hemorrhaging anymore, so I'm not in restriction." And so Jesus recognizes that power has left him, and he's looking around, and eventually the woman comes and tells the whole story. She says, "People have been exploiting me for the past 12 years. I did not have any health coverage because of the doctrine that was functioning. They believed that I did not deserve health coverage. They believed that I'm supposed to be restricted, that I did something to be restricted, because all the evangelicals say that this is where I'm supposed to be. Instead of offering love, they're always offering affliction and condemnation. And so I have been victimized by people who are supposed to represent you. And I've been crying and I've been bleeding, but I decided to leave my location because I heard that you're willing to go to places that nobody else will go. And so I decided to be courageous and leave this space. And if I said, I don't even need to touch you, if I could touch what is touching you, it's enough to heal me." She's weeping and crying at this moment, and I can see a smile on Jesus's face. And he says something that is one of the most radical things ever uttered in Scripture. Don't miss this. He says, "Daughter, you have been courageous. Your faith has made you well. You are freed from your suffering." You missed your shout right there. And I'm here to let you know that on this particular day, we have nothing to lose. We have nothing to lose, daughter, as you fight for equality. We have nothing to lose, son, as you fight for equality. We have nothing to lose as a community. We have nothing to lose to stand against those who will not even admit that January 6th and a riot and an insurrection happened. We have nothing to lose for those who don't even want to speak about a George Floyd act to be able to transform policing. We have nothing to lose to reimagine what our cities can be. We have nothing to lose on this Juneteenth to ensure that every person has health care and no one is hemorrhaging in our community. We have nothing to lose. And I'm here to let you know on this Juneteenth here at Rainbow Push, we have nothing to lose, daughter. We have nothing to lose, son. It's time for us as a community for a revolution to start. The chains have been taken off physically, but it's time to take the chains off mentally. It's time for us to organize and time for us to fight. Why? Because we have nothing to lose. America is not yet America of what it needs to be. We must fashion it into the yet to be United States of America. I've got to get out of here, but I'm here to let everyone know who's on this broadcast that we have nothing to lose. Keep up the fight. Keep on fighting, keep on pushing, keep on pressing, keep on protesting. The revolution will not be televised. We have nothing to lose. We have nothing to lose. We've got to keep up the fight. The chains are gone, but for some of us, in the words of Carter G. Woodson, we are still miseducated. It's time to start and organize and fight, daughter. It's time to fight, son. We have nothing to lose. God bless you.